Hi, it's Dr. Mike with ExecuSpect Leadership Development. I've got a question for you. How satisfied are you with the results of your investment into team development, leadership development, management training? The reason why I ask that question is because statistically, a lot of organizations aren't very satisfied with the long-term sustainable results that come from their investment. And the reason for that is because most training programs are sort of a one-size-fits-all program that doesn't really get to the heart of the issue when it comes to individualized performance development. So that being said, here at ExecuSpect, we have addressed that problem. We've identified that as a problem, and we think that we have come up with really quite a solution for this. We start with our proprietary assessment called SKAN, which stands for Skills Analysis. Our SKAN assessments are a science-based results that provide for you and your team not just an understanding of what your strengths and weaknesses are within the spectrum of leadership, but also to provide research, analysis, development, application, and then finally review. That's the spectrum of the process that we go through. It helps us to identify needs for changes in human behavior that allow your individual workers, your leaders, and your team members to become the best versions of themselves. So it really removes them from a room of 1,000 people where everybody is getting the same information, and it really gets down to the heart of the issue on what an individual's needs are to be able to become the best leader that they can possibly be. Let me give you a real quick understanding of why this works so effectively. We begin where really everybody begins, and that is the understanding of where each person is in their personality type. So you have your type and your temperament. You have your introvert, your extrovert, and then from these types, if you're an extrovert, you have the temperament of choleric and sanguine, and the introvert, you have the temperaments of phlegmatic and melancholy. But we have taken this a step further in so much as we have identified 5 leadership behaviors that are directly connected to each of these temperaments. So the introvert would be a transactional, bureaucratic, laissez-faire, and so on and so forth. But this is where it gets really interesting, because not only do we identify where your team members are with their type, temperament, and their behaviors, but we also identify where each of those people are against these very important competencies that are necessary for business and organizational effectiveness. Now, these 2 leadership styles are the most effective, the most vital, the most important leadership styles that your team members can master, and they are supported by 7 competencies. So you can see this chart here. I won't go through those because I want to kind of take you to something that I think would help to put this into perspective a little bit. Now, over here, we have the personality temperaments. These are natural to our human nature. When we come into this world, we are something in dealing with the type, temperament, and behavior. Now, that doesn't mean that if you are an extrovert today that you were born that way. Sometimes there's this nature versus nurture, things that sort of shape our behaviors, whether it was a traumatic experience or military that sort of drove you to a learned behavior of some sort. But what's really fascinating is that these competencies over here, we call them counterintuitive. They are counterintuitive because they are absolutely not natural to our human nature. In fact, so unnatural are they that these behaviors over here will essentially interfere with our ability to develop these counterintuitive leadership styles. Now, the irony of the whole thing is we have to have these. We have to master, develop, and continue to learn and grow in these 7 competencies. But these leadership behaviors, these personality types, are constantly looking to interfere with those. So this is where our SKAN assessment comes into play. So let me just give you kind of a real quick example of something that happens. So when we run our SKAN assessment, oftentimes we will identify whether or not a person is an introverted, phlegmatic, let's say bureaucrat, for example. A bureaucratic leader is somebody who adheres to policy no matter what, like regardless of what's happening, we have to go by the rules. Now, the problem with that is bureaucracy is going to defeat creativity every time. And creativity is one of the most important competencies necessary for organizational effectiveness. If your organization is going to be the best that it can possibly be, then we have to develop a sense of creativity within our organization. But leaders that will constantly adhere to rules and policy. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we need to throw our rules and policies out the window, but just to help you understand that bureaucracy is the enemy to creativity. Let me give you one more example. This is something that we find very often. You'll find managers that are very what we call transactional. They might be a kind of leader who cares enough about their employees to provide an incentive program to get them to do better. The problem with that is transactional leadership stifles empathy every single time. So what do I mean by that? I mean that just because a person is real heavy in their transaction doesn't mean that they're not empathetic. It doesn't mean that they don't care about their people. In fact, the very definition of transaction means that they care enough about them to provide a reward system to get them to do better. But transaction fails when it comes to building that bridge, building that relationship so that your team really feels like their leader cares. Trust me, there have been studies that have proven that if an organization will lean less on an incentive program and more on building relationships in an empathetic fashion, we will find more often that organizations will do better every time. So if you'd like more information about our SKAN assessments, boy, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us at info@execuspect.com, and we look forward to hearing from you and would love to provide this assessment for your organization. So, hey, listen, great to be with you. I hope you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you again.